Hey everybody, Paul from Better Chess, and I'm going to share a game with you today. I played against a very strong opponent whose name is Deep Swindle. That's his alias on Live Chess. We are constantly at each other's throats when it comes to chess games. So I'm going to show you one game that we played that I thought was very interesting. Uh, it's a win, but well, take a look and see what you think. So I'm white. Game started with e4, e5, and of course my cherished King's Gambit. He takes knight f3, very typical King's Gambit style. He plays the correct g5, protecting the pawn, and traditional King's Gambit from here, as most of you know, would be h4, right? Just that's a very standard approach to playing, h4, and just trying to break up the center. And there's 95 moves, but anyway, that's the main line. But the sideline to this is something called the Quade Gambit, which is knight c3. It's a little different approach. It's second most popular. Uh, Not as strong as probably h4 because it has very less traveled paths to take, but still a very interesting opening for amateurs in particular. So he plays now this interesting idea, which is knight c6. This is a new idea. Typically, he plays either g4 and starts to push. I play knight e5. He plays queen check, and he plays h5. But in this game, he's actually smartened up a little bit. He's playing the most challenging line. So I respond now. Looking at this position, what do you think is a good move? I think a lot of you would say something like, well, just h4, right? I mean, what's wrong with that? H4, maybe bishop c4, getting on that famous diagonal. Well, oddly enough, the move here is g3. It's the only move that really plays for an advantage here. I know you're probably thinking, that's very complex. I don't understand why you chose this opening. Well, it's very interesting. So Deep Swindle plays not a forcing move, but a good move, g4. And the only place the knight to go to stay active is knight h4. All right, so then he pushes the pawn. So now he's got two passers, or not really one passer, but one protected passer, two squares away from queening. So already there are problems for me. Let's see what happens. I play d4, grabbing the center. He plays d6. Good move, starting to open up his diagonal for his bishop. Now I'm playing bishop e3 here. The idea here is queen d2, and then I'm going to castle, move the rook over, and hopefully get into some safety. So now he plays bd7. Probably not as precise as something like knight ge7, but nevertheless, that's what he plays. So he plays bd7, queen d2, preparing to castle. Queen e7. Um, he's starting to put some pressure on this pawn. Makes some sense. I get it. He's probably going to play knight f6 next move and continue the pressure. But I say, okay, you know what? Fine. And I triple O. A really good move here is knight d5, which I didn't play, but I should have played. And he has some trouble here. If he takes the pawn, I have knight takes c7 check, king d8, and I hit him with bd3, and he is in some serious trouble. He can take the bishop, actually. That's his best move, which is very, very complex. Queen takes, king takes c7. I castle short, bishop h6. Look at all this initiative he gets. It's crazy. Queen f2, knight ge7, and then I play c3 to hold the pawn. And believe it or not, white is only a little bit better here. There's not that much of an advantage, maybe a pawn advantage. Very, very, very small. So it shows you how complex and detailed this opening is. It's crazy. Okay, so he plays queen e7. I castle. He plays knight f6. More pressure on the pawn. Um, a good move here again is knight d5. It's still a good move, even though if I play knight d5, he can't really take it because if he takes it, this is just a mess, right? And I get to take here, and he is in some deep trouble. Knight b4. I just have rook e1 with discoveries, and this problem coming. It's just too much for him to handle. But I play a very passive move, and this is, something I've been talking about on my blog, also on these videos. Passive moves, right? And this is one of them. Bishop to d3, dubious. Yes, it protects the pawn, but pawn protection is not what's required here. Another interesting thing about this opening, which is not very well known, is that typically speaking, the bishop should stay on f1. Why? Because of h3. We want to participate at some point in the breaking up of these pawns. And what's interesting is if he plays like h5 to protect it, I have moves like knight f5 with the discovery. Anyway, it gets complicated, but there's a reason the bishop is on f1 and should stay there for the foreseeable future. All right, so I play bd3, not really understanding what I'm doing. He triple O's. Look at this dynamic game here. 2 triple O's in a game is pretty uncommon. So now I'm starting to chip away here. h3, trying to break up this minority where I can. Now he plays h5, protecting. But remember, if you can kind of see through this a little bit, this rook is going to be hanging after trade, so he's got to be a little careful about this, right? So I say, all right, you know what, I'm going to open this up. Hg4. He can take with the knight, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to. Takes with the pawn. And thinking about this, I just say, wait a second, don't I have a free move here? I can play knight f5, right? Hitting the queen with check, hitting the rook, which is now in pre as well. So he has to take the knight. I take the rook, and white has an edge already. Now, this is also where it gets complicated. Bishop takes e4. Now, the move here, it's very tempting to recapture this bishop. But any way I take it is going to be a problem because he's going to get some initiative going here, right? So I got to be very careful for how I handle this. The obvious move is, just knight takes e4, right? The problem is knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, queen e4, and my pieces seem to be dwindling. And look at this, these pieces, these pawns now are very strong with less pieces on the board. That's a big problem. So this is actually what I played and why I'm worse. Here's what I should have played instead. So when he takes the move here, bishop g5, keep him in a pin. This keeps the advantage. If he takes, that's fine. Queen takes d3, and again, more pieces on the board. Bishop g7, sure. Rook h7, keeping the pin. Again, he can't capture because he is pinned. This makes some sense, right? Rook g8, and it's complicated. I can take the bishop. Craziness. Rook here, queen check, queen f5 check, hitting the king. Queen e6, and I can take. And I'm better at the end of all this trading, as insane as it looks. Really nuts. Rook f1, rook h5, and I can probably march my king up, starting to go, king d2, king e3, and potentially invade and try and capture this pawn. And this pawn is restricted too from coming up by playing f5 to protect itself, to protect the g4 pawn. So anyway, as I said, I didn't do that. I just took aggressively, not really paying attention, mechanically taking. He takes, queen takes e4. And now he has a good advantage. I mean, not winning, but certainly he's better. And what to play? Well, the good move here should be something like d5. Again, just opening up the diagonal for the bishop, hitting this knight, and creating some activity, right? Forcing him into a move, right? He has a really tricky move here in bg7, which is, I take, he takes with the knight, and so on. That's one good move for sure. Another one, you can just go knight e7 here. And then I have, threats. I can bg5 and start to harass him, and his advantage is starting to dwindle, right? Because he's kind of pinned down, and it's hard for him to move. And at some point, I can swing over to this side of the board and create some problems. So it's roughly equal at this point. But that's not what happens. After all the trades, I play this really strange move. I play queen d3 as if I want to trade, like I have this all figured out, and that's just as far away from the truth as possible. So he should play here, and he misses this d5. Because if I take like this, he takes back. Look at this. This is ridiculous. A pawn phalanx. It's very hard to stop. Doesn't do that. He goes back to, he plays queen d5, which is giving me some options here. He should have just either taken the queen or played d5, but he plays queen here. You know, it's not totally crazy hitting this a2 pawn and trying to keep in the game. But now I have this equalizing move. Um, I played rook dh1, but I have the equalizing move here of just c4, which is very strong. All right. In fact, it may be a little better here. He gets to play like queen a5. I get to play a3, and again, I'm the one in command of this here to some extent. But I don't play rook dh1. Reason? Not clear. I think I was just trying to maybe lift a rook and create pressure. Hard to say. It's a blitz game. All right, so game is still equal. He plays here. He should probably just take the pawn on a2, but he doesn't. He plays bishop g7. Fair. Um, I should probably retain pieces. Bring the rook back here. Again, this is an inactive rook. Why do I want to take that rook? There's no reason to, right? I should play a move like this. That way I can stop moves like this and I can play a rook over. And anyway, decent moves, but no, don't do that. Uh, Instead, I help him. I take the rook, and he takes with the knight, which he can do either one. It's still equal. And finally, I figure out c4. Better late than never, I guess. Queen e6. Dead equal game here. I play here. Probably rook h7 is a better move hitting the bishop, but I play here. There's discoveries here. I have d5, etc., etc. But I got to be careful because this is a very good diagonal to be on. And if I abandon it or play something like d5, I got to be mega careful he doesn't play like queen f6 and then tries to get me on this square, right? So caution is needed. Okay, so he plays bishop h6. He's a little better here, I think. Good move. I play king d2 to kind of stay up to the bishop and make sure I'm involved. f5, which is a very strong move. Remember I said before, pawn phalanx? Similar, but nice connected pawns. Very, very nice. So now I play the dubious bishop takes h6. What's better? Well, I was going to say anything, but how about just d5? Keeping squares under control. The knight has less scope now. He can only go to here. Anyway, just and maybe ideas of c5 later on. Reasons like that. But I take. He takes with check. And again, I'm anxious to get the queens off, and I don't know why. I should play a move like probably king c2 or something like that. You know, if he comes down with check or something like that, I can play king c3 like this. If he takes, uh, it's actually equal. I just take on here, and again, it's hard for him to win this. Very hard for him to win it. King b8. I have rook e8, and he's the best he has here. I think is a draw. Not much really going on here. But queen e3. I'm thinking I can get to these pawns, right? If he trades, but the reality is he's not in a rush to trade. He plays the right move. Queen h2. He's like, okay, I'll just take that free pawn. I move. And now he's winning. Black is just easily winning this game. And I know I'm lost. I have no counterplay, right? I mean, the knight is very nicely controls all these key squares. If I play a move like d5 to hit this pawn, he just plays king b8. I mean, there's just nothing I have. This is a very, very, very bad game. I'm lost. Happens. What are you going to do? Okay, so now I've practically admitted defeat, but there is a time pressure situation going on here. So I continue to play on. I just hit him with rook g1, queen h4. Uh, Again, lost. Now I play d5. He plays f7, very strong move. How defensive I am. Rook f1. And now he has anything wins here. g3 wins. That's the easiest win. Just marching his pawns down. But that's what he does to g3. I'm totally busted. So I play queen f3. Just what else can I do? I got to stop this, right? And all he has to do here is he can play something like f4 is probably the easiest move. Just ratcheting things down even more. Even a move like queen g5 is very strong too. Um, bringing the knight to f7 and so on, and knight to f7, e5, and I'm just getting killed. Nothing I can do. So f4, again, good move. I've had rook h1. I don't know. Grab the file. What else am I going to do? So here he plays queen f6 check, getting out of the way. King b3. And now he loses focus here. He should play a move like b6 or something like that, or a5, but he plays the wrong pawn move. He plays c6. A little strange. I'm still lost, dead lost. So I figure let me just grab the file here. I'll play rook h7. What do I have? Nothing, but maybe I can get into this back rank somehow through a miracle. All right, so now he starts with knight f7. Not a good move because again, he wants to get to e5. I get that, but watch what I have here. Still winning, just not as much. I have queen g4 check. Wrong move. The right move should have been capture. All right, bc6, queen c6. He's not lost, but it's a much better situation than the other one, where I'm just completely defensive, watching his pawns queen on my squares. Okay, so he plays knight f7. I hit him with queen g4 check. Dubious, but I'm lost. There's not much else to do. He plays king c7. Again, he's still fine, but I mean, walking into this pin, a little odd. So then I play back to f3. Gotta be careful, keeping an eye on these passers. He plays now the very strange king b6. I think he just wants to get off of the pin and into safety somewhere. So now I figure, well, I gotta take this pawn now, open things up. I do. He takes back with the pawn. And now I was going to play a move like maybe king a3 to prepare queen b3, but I'm so lost. What am I going to do? So I just play a4. I don't know what else to play. Just really in trouble here. Look at him, 95, and he's starting to really take control here. So then out of desperation, I hit him with a5 check, figuring just king a6, and it's over. I mean, nothing I can do. Just to show you, king a6. Where do I go? I can't get on this diagonal to take with mate. That would be great. There's just nothing I can do. My queen is being hit. It's resignable. But he does the one move he cannot make. King takes a5, and now the game is dead equal. So I see this queen c3 check. Again, he has to go to a light square, and he's fine. But he doesn't. He goes to a dark square. King b6, and now he's getting mated. He's mated in 3. Queen b4. Now he goes to a6, but it's just too late. I have king a4, sorry, queen a4 check, king b6, and queen takes a7, checkmate. So the moral of the story here, I guess, is don't ever give up because you're never really out of a game. But I would also like to underscore a few other things, and that is avoid passive moves. That bishop d3 move is not appropriate. I should have been much more active. Remember the themes of the game. Remember the f1 bishop should stay on f1, and that is something that I really forgot about. I deployed it to d3 in a very passive way. The last thing I'll mention is the queen trading. What am I thinking about the queen trades? Just it doesn't make any sense. I should not have done that. So keeping the pieces on the board, playing earlier with that rook 1 to h5, if you recall that, that's a much better move. Keeping the rooks on. Sorry, this is the move. I traded. Remember, I traded on this here. What I should have done is pull my rooks back, right? Remember? Hitting those key squares, and the game is now equal. So let's just rewind. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and I'll see you in the next chess video.